사제로 우리는 단단하게 되는 중에다 원리도 투자하지 보고가 근데 로드가 먼저 시행부터 제가 보고라 사실은 비워만 그다 도면다 다가 이케가 되는 중에서 tamamı jova tuzugi bomba chichi towa ni ma juba lama adagi lama ke ngala lama de ba zuto tu sesan lama sidi tuzugi bomba chichi towa la adagi lama de ba ri chira na to saji pe ka chi ta na sa ka sa saji bomba to ela lama de pe ke chi ba odi chi ya de chi ne za chi.
So then the importance of depending on a spiritual teacher is understood in this manner, that even though the ultimate source of all these teachings is the historical Buddha himself, but then the historical Buddha is not in front of us at this moment. And how does these teachings survive? It survives through this lineage, as we already explored in these verses from Asanga, Nagarjuna, to Adishadibankara, and then the subsequent masters of different traditions. So then we realize in this process that for all purposes and intents, at this present time, we need to receive these instructions from a teacher that is alive. So that is why we say that even though the ultimate source of all these teachings are the Buddha himself, for all purposes and intentions, in the present moment, we have to depend on a source that is in front of us. So all these, so this indicates the importance of depending on a spiritual teacher for our instructions. Yes. So then another thing to take into account for the importance of depending on a spiritual teacher is from the cultivation of tantric practices. So in tantric practices, you visualize your own teachers or your own masters as the Buddha himself. And in that process, you cannot do without the spiritual teacher. Yes. So any other questions? Can you be a little bit louder?
Yeah. Where did they come from, the teachers?
Which teachers? Lamrim. The Lamrim gi nga zo sung chu jora. The ni lung ro dang khong yora kawan ni lege yora ya gi chu.
Lamrim tanda karan zi tisi sung na je go ba chang wa diwa le le ba. Dene sung ni je ro chi. Dene ma kawan ma ta gi ma mo je sa sung ma chi. Juni tong ra mo chu diwa ba sing gi. Si ka ro da 지난 디나는 계속 같이 저도 공부 시기도 있네. 다가 좀 많고 진짜 단단 가서 지야. 아주 대기는 서로자 다가 진짜 주지. 그 상황 지금 죽고 시체는.
So then the Lamrim instruction that we are reading right now is written by the great Tibetan master Tsongkhapa. And so then when we explore, as we already discussed in the previous session, when we explore the way that Tsongkhapa highlights the importance of lineage, then we understand where these teachings come from. So generally we say that they are the actual teachings of the Buddha themselves, and then the subsequent commentary on these teachings by the masters of the past. So the Lamrim instruction is a distillation of all these teachings.
속가는 뭐 진이바 데 같이 지려봐 있나요? 아니 때문에 레버런 TV 자와네 스타트데 지도 따다 때문에 지고 있어와 아니 자와디 가르는 남된 신이 강바 강바 베퍼 이스 남된 사람이 근데 왜 아니 지금 나서는 어떤게 신이 강바 라신이 딱바다데 초도 와 아니 저기 아니 매주 제발에 깔리 제발에 베버 이 아니 삼다 무슨 저와 삼다는 거 삼바도 좋아하더라 삼다 저의 스신 템버스 제가 나보다 직 계획이 나보다 그래서 그때지 나샤주디스 아니 상주니 스신 나보지는 예고 템버가 장고가 되었습니다.
So then it ties exactly into the point that's being made about the importance of depending on a spiritual teacher. So then, the 11th verse, then the root of creating well the auspicious conditions for all the excellences of this and future lives is to rely properly with effort, both in thought and action, upon the sublime spiritual mentor who reveals the path. So, in order for us to understand the enlightened intention of the teachings, then we cannot do without a spiritual teacher or a spiritual instructor who can teach us the true meaning of this teaching, these scriptures and these teachings. So then, in order for us to create the good conditions for happiness or for happiness of this life as well as future lives, then we cannot do without depending on the spiritual teacher who reveals the path to us. So we have to depend on this sublime spiritual teacher with all the qualities, all the supreme qualities, not just in thought, but in both thought and action. Yes. So then, tying into the 11th verse, the 12th verse reads, "Seeing this, we should never forsake him, even at the cost of life, and please him with the offering of implementing his words. I, a yogi, have practiced in this manner. You who aspire for liberation, too should do likewise." So then in the 11th verse, he stresses the importance on depending on a spiritual teacher in order for us to really understand the meaning of walking on the path. And now this verse talks about the importance of actually carrying on the practice in your life, and how actually carrying on the practice of the teachings in this life is the most supreme and the most sublime of offerings one can think of offering to the teacher. So the kind of metaphor that is being used here is like even at the cost of life. Now this is meant to urge the student to not waste time. So what happens when we feel like there is a danger to our life? We immediately do whatever is necessary for us to kind of put ourselves in a safe place from that danger. We do that immediately. So like with that sense of urgency, we should strive to implement the teachings that we receive from our teachers. So rather than rather than showing a sense of deference in physical form or by giving him material offerings, the best form of offering is to actually implement these teachings in our own lives. So I, a yogi, have practiced in this manner. You who aspire for liberation should do likewise. So this is the recurring refrain that will be evident in the following verses. And he talks now from his own experience that in his spiritual pursuit he has approached it in this manner, and you who is the spiritual speaker, a spiritual seeker who wants liberation from samsaric existence should practice likewise. Yes. So then moving on from the 13th to the 14th verse, it talks about the precious nature of human birth. And this life of leisure is even more precious than a wish-fulfilling, wish-granting jewel. That I have found such an existence is only this once, so hard to find, yet like a flash of lightning, it is easy to vanish. Contemplating this situation, it's vital to realize that all mundane pursuits are like the empty grain husks floating in the winds, and that we must extract the essence of human existence. I, a yogi, have practiced in this manner. You, who aspire for liberation, too should do likewise. So then, this human birth is explained to be very precious, and the kind of metaphor which explores the precious nature of this human birth is likened to be even more precious than a wish-granting jewel. So in the traditional understanding, a wish-granting jewel is not something that everybody has. It is not something that can be acquired easily. So it is something really precious. But the human birth is even more precious than such a wish-granting jewel, because it affords us the opportunity to actually contemplate existence and then work towards the means to be liberated from the sufferings of this existence. Now, this when we have found ourselves such a precious birth in the form of human beings, then this human birth, the fact that you have been born as a human being, is only for this. Is only for this once. There is no guarantee that in the next life that you will be born as a human being and you will be afforded the same opportunity to seek, to pursue spirituality. So then, so even though this even though this human birth is so precious, then it is so easily destroyed, so easily lost, like a flash of lightning, so hard to find, yet like a flash of lightning it is easy to vanish. So when we think about the human birth or our lives, even though we can do a lot of things, and even though we have a lot of opportunities to do to seek spirituality and to do all these things, but then when we think about it carefully, then we are always just one moment away from dying, just one moment away from harming ourselves or hurting ourselves. For example, if we are walking and if there is one misstep, we are at the risk of falling down from a cliff. If we ingest one wrong thing, then we are at the risk of dying. So when we look at all that, then it's very fragile in its nature, this human birth. And so contemplating this situation, it's vital to realize that all mundane pursuits are like the empty grain husks floating in the winds. So if we realize the precious nature of this human birth, and also realize that how it is so fragile, then it makes sense that we should not always dedicate all our time and effort into doing meaningless worldly things. We should now make the effort to kind of dedicate this precious human life, which is so fragile, to extract the essence of human existence. So what is the essence of human existence? The essence of human existence is to seek a liberation and to seek enlightenment. So we should dedicate, by making the most of this human birth, we need to dedicate the time and effort to seek liberation and enlightenment. And I, a yogi, have practiced in this manner. You who aspire for liberation too should do likewise. Yes.
세지 맞죠. 치도 보다 매는 딱 하는 거 먹고 있다. 와, 집에 들을 때 맞아. 저기 무슨 일로 나 뒤바도 되길래 나 두어 와, 뒤바도 같이 산이 쉬어하는 거예요. 데리고 가서 단단한 데에 산이 와, 아주 친구 좀 갔다 내야 되거든. 제가 신경 쓰자. 근데 이제 단단한 저 유튜브 유대는 꽤 짜지 그래. 와, 그래서 상담 딱도 시에도 얘도 아니 무슨 멤버 중도 하는 친구 자자 가르치는 거는 제가 말하지 않거든요. 그래서 네 단단 이해 잘 되네. 이해 가고 있는 와, 단단 이해 잘 되게 초도 주가 있는 하거나
So then when we're talking about the precious nature of the human birth, then from the Buddhist perspective, then there are different ways of explaining how this human birth is so precious by citing the example of actually throwing grains on a window, on a glass pane. And so if you throw grains on a glass plane, then the chance is very minimal that the grain actually sticks on the window, sticks on the glass pane. So that's the kind of chance or the probability that one achieves human birth. But maybe this does not really appeal to the modern mind, these kind of examples. But maybe we can explore the fragility and the uncertainty of human birth, as well as its precious nature through that lens, by citing the example of our own birth and how we grow up. So as soon as we take birth, then our mothers have to be really careful when the baby comes out of the womb. The mother and the doctors or whoever is looking after the child has to be really, really careful at every step and turn, because the baby cannot even lift its own head up at that moment. And any misstep, any kind of lack of foresight in that situation could spell the end of the baby's life in that very instance. So this kind of also highlights, through experience, the fragility of the human existence from birth. And now, as we grow up, we become toddlers, then even then the mother or the parents have to kind of keep watch over the child at every turn, because he could hurt himself. He could hurt himself at every turn. And then as we grow up into adults, from teenagers to adults, then there are a lot of factors which could be dangerous and which could be harmful for our lives. For example, we could be caught up in a conflict, and then we end up physically hurting other people, and we ourselves get hurt in the process. And then through a disturbance of the natural balance of elements, then through flood, natural disasters, and so forth, at any turn, it's just one instant away from our lives being destroyed. So this kind of highlights what the point that is being made, that this human birth that we have achieved is so precious, just exactly because of its fragility and its uncertainty. So nobody can guarantee the fact that we will be able to wake up alive tomorrow, if we think about it. And then if we think about next life and this life, then it's just one breath away, if we think carefully about it. If you forget to take one breath in, and if you're not able to take a breath in, then that's the end of this life. So this is the kind of point that is being made, how fragile it is, how there is no certainty, how nothing is guaranteed in this human life. So that is the exact reason why we need to make the most of this human life. Yes. So then, as we kind of talked about the example, the traditional example, highlighting the precious nature and how rare is this opportunity to be born as a human being. Then we talked about the example of the throwing a grain on a glass pane, and how like the chances of grain sticking to the glass is very minimal. So then this kind of example maybe does not appeal to the modern mind from one side, and from other side maybe it's because it is beyond the conceptualization of a modern mind to get at an understanding of the precious nature of rebirth and so forth. So there is a famous story which kind of makes the same point. So in Tibet there was a great master, and he was not well traveled at all, because Tibet was an isolated country until the turn of the last century. And then he was asked to give teachings by his followers and disciples in China. So he's traveled out of the country for the first time. And then when we are giving Dharma teachings, we always make the point of talking about the precious nature of human birth. So then when he went to China, then a student made the point that you always talk about how human birth, this human birth is so precious and it's so rare to find. It's so rare. But then look at China. There's so many people like ants. How could the human rebirth be so rare and so precious? So then this kind of makes the point that if we are not able to quite grasp or quite accept a concept or quite accept a teaching in this instance, then just because we cannot ratify it tangibly with our own eyes or with our own experiences, then we cannot begin to refute it or deny it just like that. Because the other side is true too, when we look at the fact that us as Tibetans, when we think about the fact that human beings have been able to send someone to the moon, then this is beyond us when we think about it. But we don't begin to like refute this. And when we apply it to the general population in this earth, most of us only hear about it or see it on television, but we have never really ourselves been on the moon. But we don't begin to like refute it or deny it just because of that. Yes.
rola anche vedere anche congiunta saje ko chugo de ne congiunta yes congiunta la de ba ye shere chomro lo de temba na de ani chomro de ani he de suzu lo da samo ya ko cha tenes de lab jas kasa de lab jan nyamba me ba jas de lab jadi ani suzu nyamba me ba lo shani lab jan nyamba nyamba ya la.
So then, tying in to the points that are being made in the 13th and 14th verses, we talk about the precious nature of this human birth and its fragility. Then the 15th verse makes the exact same point: how there is no certainty that how there is no certainty that after we pass away from this life, that we will be born as human beings again. So it reads, there is no certainty that after death we may not be born in the lower realms. The protection from such terror lies in the three jewels alone. So we must make firm the practice of going for refuge and ensure that its precepts are never undermined. So when we're talking about life after death, then there is no certainty that even though we are born as human beings in this one, that when we pass away, there's no certainty or guarantee that we'll be born as human beings again. And even worse than that, we might even be born in the three lower realms, such as the hell realm, the animal realm, or the hungry ghost realm. So nobody can say with confidence that that they will not be born in one of these three lower realms in the next life. So then there is a sense of fear to be born as an animal, to be born as a hell being, to be born as a hungry ghost. So in order to save ourselves from such fear, that the protection from such fear lies only in the three jewels, and we must go. Now, since the protection from such fear lies in the three jewels alone, then we must make firm the practice for going for refuge in the three jewels and ensure that its precepts, that its advices, are never undermined. Also. So then, when this verse makes clear the importance of going for refuge in the three jewels, then what do we really mean by going for refuge in the first place? Going for refuge means that we realize that if we keep taking birth in samsara, then we keep continuing suffering, and we want to be free from suffering in the sense that we want to be liberated from samsaric existence itself. This is the ultimate aim with which we go to a refuge, and through, let's say, a short-sighted aim, or for temporary aim, a temporary aim for going for refuge is to safeguard oneself against being born in the three lower realms and the subsequent suffering of the three lower realms. So this is the reason why in Buddhism we stress the importance of going to refuge in the three jewels. So what are the three jewels? The three jewels are not some self-created absolute entity, but the three jewels are the Buddha, the Dharma, and the Sangha. The Buddha being the teacher, the Dharma being the actual teachings, the Sangha being the spiritual community. So these are the three jewels. And from the Buddhist perspective, whether one begins to call oneself a Buddhist practitioner really depends on whether one goes for refuge in the three jewels or not. One can call oneself a Buddhist when one formally takes refuge in the three jewels. So, what is the purpose of going for three jewels? Maybe it is better explained by giving an example, or exploring it through this analogy. Let's say there is a sick person. A sick person has this fear that he's going to die from the sickness he has, or he's going to suffer so much from the sickness that he's undergoing through. So now he needs someone to save him from this sickness, someone who can cure him of the sickness. And then there's a doctor who diagnoses his disease or whatever, and that doctor is understood to be the Buddha. And then the actual medicine or the actual course of remedy that the doctor advises that the sick person has to follow, or has to medicine that the sick person has to take, is understood to be the Dharma or the teachings of the Buddha himself. And then the spiritual community is understood to be as the nurses who kind of help the sick person regain his health over time. So with this analogy now we understand the importance of going for refuge. When we talk about a sick person needing the guidance of the doctor in diagnosing his particular disease, and then prescribing him the medicine that he needs, and then the nurses kind of help him regain his health over time. Then if we if we bring back this understanding into the context of going for refuge in the three jewels, then when we think of ourselves as the sick person, then what are we sick with? We are sick with the suffering, the endemic or the pervasive conditioning of being born in samsara again and again, that we have to go through the suffering of birth, aging, sickness and death again and again when we are born in samsara. So liberation from such cyclic existence or cyclic suffering can be offered by the Buddha himself, and the Buddha offers us in the form of medicine his own teachings. And then in order for us to cultivate our practice and work on the path towards liberation, then we cannot do without the help of the spiritual community, which is explained as the nurse. Yes. So then what are the three jewels? Then what are the analogy that corresponds to the Buddha, Dharma and Sangha? So what's the analogy used to understand the jewel of Buddha? And the Dharma? Nurse.
다 되는 데들이가 나타나서 그러더라. 아니 근데 이제 나서다 내가 나서는 제가 다 근데 일단 안다 아니 산제도 내야 아니 땅에서 가르려나 저도 들어와서 간단하게 내려. 단다디가 저로에 되게 내려야 되더라. 난 남배 중에 얘는 맨날 들어라. 저로다 내려다 대시다. 아니 샤슈스한테 комп아니다. 아니 다 아니 소파션 주는 거야. 가르고 가르시다 디나고 들이더라. 그래서 만드는 거리 마네지는 거야. 다들 이제 아니 내야 색깔만이 간단하게 대상에 색깔만이 내야 karla de kare ke kabu ge sho la na la de na ko je dibal da ma pe ro sha da ko na ko pe ro da dibal me ke wa da ji so na re ge ji za na ko sha ba kabu la de ta ba da na ji mo ko na re ge de ji za ani kar ko kabu la ya ni se ji de kana le de ne le da je ko ba le kar sa ya ne ni je mu ji ko ba ni le par sa me o ma le ga ya ko ni che wa ni ma le de ko sa ko di ko ma le ga ni ba di se je se ba da 데로 치워는 되고 돈이 되게 아니 얘기 남도 얘네 근데 그 계획도 계획도 남주도 이제 땅으로 시도도 그래서 내 삶에 남도를 수주고 땅에 계획이 수주를 치고를 나고 치고 다들 마루바지는 하도고 남도 수신들이 정말 지신이라 아니 딱딱하게 레데야 무슨 거다 따다를 키우다 남도 수신 주가 라리에서 제가 그냥 타바다 번째쯤에도 뭐가라야 뭐야 이네 네 아니 예서는 뭐야 그런도 야 무슨 뭐라 예스 와 아니 내조 예전에 다들 제잖아 제라라 제가 내조 버처럼 여기 보라게 아니 이제 무슨 뭐라야 아니 그때비야 배치신 지기 예스 내가나 내가래 뭐 안창지 있나야 아니 가봐도 와나 창지 우리 배치신 지기 예스
So then moving on, the 16th verse. This in turn depends on contemplating well the white and black karma and the effects and on perfect observance of the ethical norms. I, a yogi, have practiced in this manner. You who aspire for liberation too should do likewise. So then it kind of ties into the point that's the last two lines of the previous verse. So we must make firm the practice of going for refuge and ensure that its precepts are never undermined. So this in turn depends on contemplating well the white and black karma and their effects and on perfect observance of ethical norms. So as we seek refuge and take refuge in the three jewels, then it falls upon us as a responsibility to follow the guidance, to follow the advice that is offered that we get from going to refuge in the three jewels. So in order to ensure that we are following the guidance of the three jewels, then it depends on whether we are following the guidance of the three jewels or whether we are undermining the guidance of the three jewels. Depends on whether we contemplate well on our actions, whether we look towards doing good things or whether we look towards doing bad things. So white and black karma meaning positive actions and negative actions. And karma in this instance could be understood as actions themselves. So this in turn depends on contemplating well the white and black karma and their effects and on perfect observance of ethical norms. So from the Buddhist perspective, a code of conduct or a sense of morality comes from a basic appreciation for the fact that everything is causally linked. So if everything is causally linked, then if we accumulate good conditions and good causes, then the result is bound to be good. And if we accumulate negative causes and negative conditions, then the result is bound to be negative. So with that kind of basic acceptance and basic recognition, then we can begin to live morally, to live ethically. So I, a yogi, have practiced in this manner. You who aspire for liberation should too too should do likewise. So in this manner, this text explores the central tenets, let's say, or the central teachings of Buddhism, such as the Four Noble Truths. In the previous line, we talk about the importance of going for refuge in the three jewels, and in this particular verses, it talks about the importance of understanding the law of causality or karma. Yes. So then I forgot to ask you one question. So then who is the sick person in that analogy?
Is a person not by samsara.
Koana koe vechiboduris. So then, at this point, it's important to remember the kind of words that we discussed previously in a session, wherein, when before the Buddha gave his teachings, he talked about how he cannot wash away all our karma, all our bad karma, and how he cannot magically take upon himself all the suffering of sentient beings, and the only thing that he can offer us is these teachings, the Dharma, which illuminates the nature of reality as it is. So it is our responsibility to follow and to practice these teachings. So this is the importance of establishing an understanding of the law of causality in the context of going for refuge, wherein we begin to think that if we go for refuge, then it means an absolution of all our non-virtues and all our bad karmas. But this is not the case so, and we can now even begin to explore the meaning or the reason of using that analogy of the doctor, nurse, and medicine when we're talking about going to refuge. And there is a sense that there is a personal responsibility of the patient himself to follow the doctor's directions and to actually take these medicines on time. So, for example, when the doctor begins to prescribe and diagnose an illness in the patient, then just reading that prescription or just reading the diagnosis, would that help the patient regain his health? That doesn't help in any way. Now the patient has to actually follow the direction of the doctor to take the medicines on time, to adopt a diet that actually helps him become better or regain his health and so forth. So there is a sense of personal responsibility over one's own health in this instance too. So likewise, even in the instance of going for refuge in the three jewels, then there is a sense of personal responsibility over one's own actions. Thus, so this is also talked about in the Guide to the Bodhisattva's Way of Life by Shantideva, wherein he says that even if a doctor hands the prescription and the medicine in the patient's hand, if the patient himself does not only looks at that prescription and the medicine, then it doesn't really help the patient. So then, off topic, I'm going to ask you a question. Have you ever been to the doctors and they prescribed you a bunch of medicines, and then you ate it for a few days and then you threw away the rest of the prescription? Yes? So then I myself have done this, that I've thrown away prescriptions after a few days. When we go to a traditional Tibetan doctor, they check the pulse and then they prescribe you for a long duration of time. So then there are instances wherein I have thrown like medicines away. So now then when I look back at it, it's such a waste of resource, and it's such a waste of medicine, because if I shouldn't have thrown them away. I should have, because this medicine which goes to waste could have been prescribed to someone else who is really in need of them. So we should never really do things like that. And now this is off topic. Now like bringing that back to our understanding of how we should approach the Dharma or the teachings or the Buddhist teachings, then we shouldn't do it like that too. When we feel like we are a little bit disturbed and emotionally unstable and so forth, then we listen to teachings and become a little calm. And then for our daily lives, for the long run, then we forget about these teachings. This is not the approach one should take too. So then this is the kind of approach one should adopt, a consistent approach, wherein you live each day with a sense of cultivating your practice, rather than only doing it when you are reading a book, reading this Buddhist literature, or like reading a good book generally. And then you feel like, this makes sense, and then you feel good for a duration of, for that duration, for a few days after that. And then you completely forget about all the things that you learned. You forget to really implement them in your life. This is not the approach one should take. If you want to cultivate a practice, then a practice should be cultivated every day, day by day. Yes. So then we stop here and break for lunch.